guys know, we spend a significant amount of our lives at work, right? What I find is that if I actually look good, I feel good, and I'm a lot more confident. Now, your average scrubs, which I'm wearing right now, horribly fitting, right? Itchy. They don't absorb sweat very well, so you can see the patches whenever they appear. And we look quite rugged at work, to be honest. Hence why the term we always say that it's like working in pajamas. Now that's where figs come in. So I'm wearing the fig scrub right now. So this fits a lot better around the shoulders and the arm, and including the lats itself. It looks more professional, it is more comfortable, and it's more functional as well. You've got the 2 pockets over the left side of the chest, and they use this antimicrobial tech to produce the scrub itself, so it absorbs sweat better and it doesn't become smelly and stinky basically. Head over to wearfigs.com and use the code FIGSUK for 15% off your first order. Let's head back to the podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Scrubbed In Show. I hope you've all been keeping well. So it might come as a shock, but this is the first episode after a very, very long time, and you're probably seeing me and Az back on your screen again. It's an absolute pleasure to have one of the first few guests of this new season. We're joined by Dr Declan Kelly, who is the founder and CEO of Eolas, who I'll describe is building something super interesting in light of the way we are heading towards in AI. An amazing tool which allows clinicians to access the right knowledge at the right time at points of care. A lot of the people listening are clinicians, so they know, we've done that little cheeky Google search, we've gone against guidelines, but this is kind of fitting the bill there. And we'll really dive in, get into how it all started, where it's now, the amazing tractions they've had. But an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, Declan. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks guys. Always good to jump on and get a chat. So thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So we always start kind of the initial motivation to pursue a career in medicine, in healthcare. And obviously since then you've kind of gone on to different things. But tell us about that initial motivation. Why medicine? Why medical school? Why did a young Declan want to become a doctor when he grew up?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I suppose there's lots of different angles to that as well. I think in general, especially in the UK, because medicine is an undergraduate degree for a large part. It's now becoming more and more postgraduate, but I came in at the undergraduate level. So I did my GCSE exams, then I did my A levels, and then I went straight into medicine from there. I think, to be completely candid and be completely honest, as a 16-year-old and 17-year-old deciding what subjects to do, to decide what you do for uni, you don't have a clue how the world works and you don't have a clue what decisions you want to make. I think the thing that resonates generally with most doctors is you have this intrinsic sense of that you want to do something bigger than yourself. You want to do something to help other people, and that combination of things is always intrinsically, I think, inside us and lots of other people. That was one of the driving motivating factors. One of the other driving motivating factors was a keen interest in the sciences. Going through GCSE and then A levels, doing those subjects, they are really, really, really interesting subjects. And it's always intriguing to learn just how systems work in general. And I think that kind of flows into the other aspect of the side of me, which is I love computer science, and I also did computer science at A level as well. So I did a lot of coding at that time too. So thinking about things in a systems way. The other aspect in general is just, if you go to a grammar school and you get straight A's in your sciences, they're going to force you into doing medicine. And I think it would be lying if that we didn't actually say that was a large reason as well. And the converse is true. If you do English and you're very good at English-based subjects, they force you into doing law. So at least that was true in our school. So that was certainly a large part of it.
I definitely relate to when you kind of do well in your GCSEs and A levels, the narrative becomes very quickly, it's a shame if you don't go to medical school. You've got the grades, you can become a doctor. I think that was the case for me, definitely. Not knowing what I wanted to do, and I kind of feel like I fell into medicine, and I would have been easy kind of pursuing other careers. Tell us kind of that journey of kind of finishing medical school, becoming a junior doctor, which now they call resident doctor. How was it? Did it live up to your expectations? And what I'm kind of guys, how did you kind of start to pivot away, or kind of where did kind of the origin story of Eolas start to come from?
So I graduated in 2015 and I worked clinically for about 5 years. I loved medicine. I loved practicing medicine. I went down the emergency medicine path, really, really enjoyed it. Did all the exams, loved doing that, loved learning more. And it was around maybe 3 or 4 years in where I started coding again as well. And I fell in love with that. I fell in love with building product. I fell in love with being able to solve real world problems with code and software. So there was a combination of a push and a pull. And the pull was definitely you're able to build software and solve problems in the real world, as well as AI is coming rapidly down the pipeline. At that time, there was no large language models. It was more the big thing at the time was convolutional neural nets for either for radiology or X-ray detection or various other aspects. So I coded up a few different things in that space. And I really enjoyed doing all of that. The push aspect of it was, and it just became evident very, very quickly the more you mature as a doctor, where you start to see the system as a whole, as opposed to F1, F2, and you work your way through. You're kind of, your head's down. You're working as hard as you can. You're trying to survive. You're trying to do the best you can. But then you kind of realize, and you zoom out. You go, oh, actually, the system's to blame here. The fact that I can't see more patients in emergency medicine isn't 100% to do with myself. It's also the system. And you can then start to see where software can make that system better. So there's that aspect of that push as well. So very rapidly, within the space of about 6 months, I developed Eolas for our own hospital and launched it to solve some of our own problems. And then from there, it was kind of like pulling back the curtain of realizing actually this can be, software can be applied in the real world, and I kind of caught the bug at that stage.
What was the exact trigger though? So you're in an A&E department, you're working away, right? Why pick up coding when you've got more exams, you can be doing PhDs, you can be competing for more and more senior posts, more and more money or what have you in the system itself? What exactly tipped you over the edge to say, no, I need to be the one to solve this?
Yeah. So yes, I suppose frame it in my own mind as less like I need to be the one to solve, is more than just this needs solved as such. So it was based out of frustration, essentially. The idea that you're working in the emergency department or you're working in any other department. What do I do with this patient next in my hospital? What's our referral pathway? Who do I phone? And you have to go onto the intranet, and then you spend 20 minutes searching for the intranet, and you get really annoyed and you shout. And then you ultimately don't find it, and then you just ask someone, and it just wasted so much time. That was the point where just like, actually, all of this content exists somewhere. Let's build a system that aggregates in one place that allows you to get it faster. So I kind of built it for myself initially, and then rolled it out to our own department. And then within 6 months of that, it was used in 28 hospitals around the world, including Stanford and a number of other hospitals. So it was kind of at that point realized, oh, wait a minute, this is actually a pretty big problem, and it's quite ubiquitous. So we did some research, and we found that there's 2 billion medical decisions made every single day. And the vast majority of time, the world's medical knowledge and your own context-specific medical knowledge isn't actually being accessed. So that was really the impetus to realize, right, let's launch Eolas. So Eolas, just for if you're interested, it's the Irish word for knowledge or information. So that's kind of where it comes from. So it was born out of that, and I suppose really back to the frustration part as well. So it's really core to our DNA as a team. So there's 7 members in the Eolas team, 5 of us are doctors. And it's really core to that point of, you're going out, your job is hard enough as it is. You shouldn't be wrestling with an intranet system to find a PDF. That should be table stakes. That should be like, this should be very easy to access. And unfortunately it's not. So it's really like, we're not equipping doctors, nurses, pharmacists, healthcare professionals with the tools that they need to be successful, and we're sending them out onto the front lines and not giving them those tools. So it was really born out of all of that.
I love that. I can probably say 100% of our listeners probably resonate with that problem of grappling with PDFs and where do I find this bit of pathway, or who do I call? Going back to that bite moment though. So you've built Eolas, right? You're in a department. A lot of our listeners are budding entrepreneurs or they're product builders. They always ask this question, yeah, you build something, but how do you get the bite? How do you get a department to say, okay, we want to use it, we want to pilot it? What's those steps to adoption?
Yeah, so solve the problem is the first thing, I think, and I think a lot of people apply a technology to something that is not a problem in the real world. So always start with the problem first, and the technology comes second. It just so happens that AI and lots of other technologies help solve lots of problems, but I think people maybe get that in reverse, and be very, very clear about what problem you're solving. And the other aspect is then be very clear about who you're solving that problem for. I think that's one of the things we learned at Eolas quite quickly. It actually solves the problem for 2 people. One is the hospital, the senior level of the hospital, the administrative staff and the senior medical directors, who need somewhere as a central repository for this information to live and manage it and version control, etc. So you're solving their problem. but then you're also solving the doctor's problem of being able to access that information. And things like SharePoint solve the first problem. You can technically put whatever you want there, but no one can access it, and therefore if it's never being used, it's not very useful. So you're solving two problems. So I think it's just been very super clear around what is the problem you're solving and who are you solving that problem for, and that's the first and starting point. And then the next point is find a clinical champion. So that's the thing that allows things to take it off. It's getting it from outside of you to somebody else that feels strongly enough about that to advocate for it. I would say, and this is not true for all products that go into the healthcare space, but I would say keep the barrier to adoption in the initial phases as low as possible. If you can make the product in a way that is safe and it isn't a medical device, for example, so you can actually get it into the hands of people and get it tested. Now, sometimes that's not possible, and you have to go down the right path, but get it in the way where there's a low barrier to entry. I would do it that way. Make it super easy for someone to either to procure it or buy it. So Eolas, for example, we have a platform initially in its current iteration isn't a medical device and can be used by an individual department. So we don't need to go to the hospital at the top and convince lots of key stakeholders to adopt this hospital-wide. It can be used in one department and get evidence around how safe and effective and efficient it is. So that was really what our approach was. So find the problem, define product market fit for that problem, and then find a clinical champion.
I love that. And in terms of evidence collection, I know the NHS and I think healthcare in general, they love data. Did you have to prove it out, or was it a no-brainer? Because it is a no-brainer to me and to all doctors who've experienced the problem. What was that journey like if you had to produce the evidence?
Yeah, no. So there is a large element of like, this is a no-brainer. Of course, we want to access this quicker, and a lot of hospitals then bought it because of that. I think the evidence generation piece is extremely important, and the earlier you start that, the better. Once you realize it's a problem and your product actually solves that problem, start to then generate the evidence for that. And see it through the lens of what are you trying to solve for. And generally, better, safer, faster is better, safer, faster, cheaper. The kind of the ones that you're going to look like in a health system. So we started generating evidence around that. So in Eolas now, it's been used by 500 sites, and those sites are very, very proactive. And they've helped us a lot. So we sent out information around doing case studies, and out of those 500, there's about 200 sites actually started doing their own case studies on Eolas. So there's a number of brilliant results from those. So one has shown that it's 9 times faster than current systems, and that was what they objectively proved. So we're able to go and say, doctors, nurses, pharmacists are able to find the information that they need 9 times faster, which means they're spending less time searching, more time with patients, and that's beneficial to the healthcare system. The other aspect that we really want to try to prove is it increases compliance with best practice and guidelines. And therefore there's reduced risk of medical error, downstream reduced risk of litigation, better patient care. So that's the other pillar that we try to prove as well. But yeah, I agree. Try to generate evidence as quickly as you can.
I think that's amazing. And what you said is a very smart and strategic way in terms of adoption, kind of keeping the barrier low, making sure it doesn't need to go through kind of the medical device, the regulations, so departments can procure it, start using it straight off the bat, see the value, because you are genuinely solving a problem. It kind of reminds me of kind of, the crazy traction even companies like Open Evidence are doing. And there's a lot of emphasis and a lot of funding going into kind of these point of care tests. Doximity acquired another competitor. So like, this is a hot space and a hot topic. Are there ideas or kind of the intention to double down and go towards more kind of clinical decision support, kind of being the pathway or kind of the workflow of treating patients' diagnosis, or is it more kind of information retrieval? Which direction do you see Eolas traveling to?
Yeah. So I think to have true, meaningful, lasting value at the point of care and actually impact patient care, you have to go down the medical device route as software. I think that builds trust, it builds credibility, and most importantly, you can do a lot more with what you have if you go down and improve the medical device aspect and actually put the time and effort and work into doing that. And I suppose I can use Eolas as an example of, what does Eolas look like if we don't go down that path, and what does it look like if we do go down that path? So, if we don't go down that path, we're ultimately a very advanced search engine which just searches the information when you want to find that, and that's extremely useful. And it's used millions and millions of times per month, and people love using that aspect of it. Where we're taking Eolas is becoming the knowledge infrastructure layer for an entire health system. So taking both external content from trusted sources as well as internal content for your hospital. We use computer vision to extract all of that information. We then allow a RAG-based search on top of that. So where the true value of that is can that be queried in real time and in context? So if you imagine the patient note is taken from an ambient listener or taken into the electronic record, that note is then sent to Eolas via an API. And then we can say, for this patient in front of you, based on your policies and procedures in your hospital, this is the next best step, and this is what you should do. And that's extremely valuable. So that means that our metric for success there is, out of the 2 billion decisions that are made every single day for patients, how many of them had an automatic query to one of these knowledge bases like Eolas or elsewhere. And that's really where you get the quality of care extremely high for every single patient every single time. That's a medical device, and you need to go through the pathway to actually add that value. If you wanted to make that not a medical device, what you could do is, hey, this patient clearly has hypertension. Here's the hypertension PDF. That's useful. It's probably better than what's currently happening, but it's not given the decision support that actually that needs to be given. So you start to enter that world. So that's really the path that we're on.
Amazing. Declan, so I want to take it back a notch, I guess. So I'm a Eolas user, okay? And I accidentally became a user. I'll tell you how it happened. So at our hospital, we use microguide, and antibiotics is one of those things. Every hospital has a different antibiotic for their patient, depending on what guidelines they decide is the best. And one day my phone updated to Eolas. So avid user, and I see the app being used countless of times in the department. So I can see it solves a real pain point. So talk to us a little bit about that acquisition, clearly that happened, of microguide, and how did that sort of support the journey and everything? How did it all fit in?
Yeah, great question. And I'll chat to you after about getting some feedback here as well. So I think strategically thinking about where is the true value of Eolas. So when a doctor's making a decision, they generally pull on content from two different sources. One is internal, specific to that hospital, and the other is external, i.e. national level guidelines. So NICE, European Society of Cardiology, the BNF, different content like that. So the external content is super important. That's really, really needed for a doctor to make a decision. But ultimately, if you ask yourself, how often, and open evidence again is in that bucket as well, how often do you need to make a decision, which is, what is the latest, best possible treatment for this patient that I can give? You make those decisions once a week probably, or if you're on oncology, maybe once a day max. The decision that you need more and more often is that those last mile decisions of, I have a patient here in my clinic and I need to make a social work referral, or I need to make sure that I get this patient to the cath lab. How do I activate the cath lab? Those decisions are made. You make 10 of those decisions every single day, and you either have to ask your colleague, or it's tacit knowledge in your head that you know of because you've worked there for so long. So all of that stuff is where Eolas really hyper focuses. So I'll zoom back out again and answer your question directly, which is that's where microguide fits in very, very well there. So what Eolas needs to look like in 5 years' time is the world's largest repository of internal medical knowledge. And microguide in the UK was a very large repository of infectious disease guidelines that for each individual hospital showed you exactly how to treat, and so that is extremely valuable. Really helped users. So it was a great marriage as such. So that's why we brought all of that content, put it in the Eolas platform to make it more easily accessible as well.
Amazing.
I love that.
The thing that just hit me now, one, I know you're a true startup founder when you said I'm going to ask you for feedback at the end, which is amazing to hear. Tell us kind of the differences in terms of adoption, the way software is procured in the UK versus other geos, because you're kind of an international, you're global, particularly in the UK versus US, and what is kind of the adoption curve looking like in kind of those two geos?
Yeah, so I suppose to give further context, that our focus currently is UK, Ireland, and the US. Will now be expanded into Europe as well. And in the UK, we have about 80% of all acute trusts use the platform across the NHS, and then in the US, there's about 40,000 users across places like Stanford, Mass General, Boston Children's, and a number of others. Wow. So it's given this kind of perspective of how the systems differ. I think they are simultaneously both very the same and very different, and the similarities are back to that idea of that problem. It always comes back to that one core problem of make sure that you find a big enough problem to solve that happens and occurs for enough people globally. and then you'll have a business essentially. So fundamentally, the ability to access knowledge rapidly and easily at the point of care for your hospital exists in the US and exists every other systems. Stanford were one of the earliest users in their emergency department, and that was one of the kind of crystallizing moments for us of like, wait a minute, if this is happening there and in the middle of Silicon Valley and they can't access the knowledge, this must be a big problem. So the fact that they can't actually access information is a big problem. What are the big differences? There's a much higher willingness to pay and adopt software, I would say, in the US if you can prove directly that it moves the needle. And as soon as you prove that it will save costs or save time or improve patient care, I think there's maybe a slight fallacy around the NHS wants to improve patient care and that's what they want to do, and the US doesn't care about that. They only care about saving time and money. Yes, they care about saving time and money, but these are all medical professionals and they do want to deliver better care. So making sure you prove that in the US is just as important. But as soon as you do prove that, it's much faster for the buying cycle than we found maybe elsewhere. So that's one of the big differences. One other big difference, just as a strange, weird, nuanced point, is because we're a knowledge manager and that's what we live and breathe and love. The knowledge seeking behavior of clinicians in the US is very different than the clinicians in the UK and Europe. Here, it's much more socialized type medicine of, okay, what does NICE say? What does the national guidelines say? Or what does my hospital say? I have to do that. So the order of hierarchy of knowledge is internal hospital policies. Okay, if they don't have one, then I'll go to NICE or I go to national guidelines. Okay, if there isn't one there, then I'll go to the journal articles and see what the latest evidence is from the journals. It's the complete opposite the way around in the US. The US, it's much more libertarian. The doctors will go to up to date, and now increasingly they're going to open evidence. So they're making a decision and working at the top of their license of making those decisions for patients. That's slowly shifting. We're seeing more guidelinization as such of hospitals on the national level. That's slowly changing, but they are making much more libertarian-based decisions themselves for their patient in front of them, as opposed to I have to do this because some national system has told me that I have to do this. Obviously, that's not completely true, but it's very interesting. That's the big difference that we noticed when we went to the US.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. And it just hit me. They probably have less of kind of this reliance upon internal knowledge, a lot more autonomy, and the way they kind of pursue and manage patients. Eolas, in a way, reminds me of a marketplace as such, where there's stakeholders, both in terms of the frontline healthcare professionals and kind of the managers and execs. When you have access to a highly engaged community of healthcare professionals, what are the opportunities that kind of present itself? Can you start to work with the pharma industry, health tech? Can you kind of disseminate knowledge quicker, faster? That's not only clinically relevant. Who are the other beneficiaries of a platform and a community like Eolas?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I suppose the platform itself, it's used by hundreds of thousands of healthcare professionals millions of times per month, and specifically now that searching behavior is changing. 2 or 3 years ago, people used a search engine. Now people use an answer engine, and that's really important because it shows intent. So 2 or 3 years ago, you would have searched for STEMI to get the STEMI guideline. Now users we see are searching for what is the best antiplatelet to use for STEMI, or what does my hospital recommend which antiplatelet I use for STEMI. So they're using natural language, and then we're having millions of these queries per month. So at a population level, across 80% of the acute hospitals in the NHS, you get to see insights into search behavior across that entire population. So, there's a lot of respiratory type searches in this region. Is there an outbreak of COVID, or is there a new pandemic coming, et cetera, et cetera. So you get a lot of interesting insights and engagement. That's really valuable to health systems as a whole. So we're able to give back those search terms and that behavior to the health systems, to an individual trust. We're also able to give them back at a national level, to be able to see what the patterns are emerging and where the knowledge gaps are. That's really useful for national level guidelines around, who's searching for what. Oh, wait a minute, we don't have a policy for that, and there's a lot of interest in that information. So that's extremely useful for that side. It's also extremely useful for industry, and to see where the knowledge gaps are for healthcare professionals and where they could be served better. So the insights is extremely important and very, very useful. So we do work with industry on that. The other aspect, as you said, is the engagement. Is, you know, you have a very engaged population that are very difficult to access on a platform. Can other players put content on that platform to make sure it's easily accessible? And so we work with pharma and medical device companies to do that, because they spend, you know, millions and millions per year producing extremely high quality, trusted content, either medical education or safety information about how to use drugs and devices more effectively. And it usually sits on their own websites. And I don't know about you guys, but like, I didn't really go perusing all the pharma websites when I was practicing clinically. So you need to be able to access that information to make decisions for patients. That's really important to know that and be up to date with that. So we work with pharma to make sure that gets streamlined to the right places. So everything from, you know, latest evidence around medicines right down to rare diseases, you know, for this patient that has to go through a diagnostic odyssey of not being able to get tested, what is my referral pathway in this area of London or Manchester for this rare disease? And knowing stuff like that's really important. So we work to do that as well, and it has to be done obviously in a way that makes sense and is actually useful for the doctor and useful for the patient.
Yeah, amazing. Declan, a question on the future landscape, right? So with the explosion of AI, LLMs, and everything, right? The barrier to build is very low. So as we've seen in the AI scribe scene, there's about 100 of them. And they're now all looking for differentiation, and they're all now merging into each other's in terms of features and what things each software or platform can do. What does the future hold? So if Eolas is in the same area-ish, right? Where are we? How are we differentiating? How are products going to move? Are they going to just end up acquiring each other to become one big winner in the market? How do you see it panning out?
Yeah, it's a great question. And a colleague of mine described this as, if you kind of zoom back over the last couple of decades and look forward over the next couple of decades, the unbundling and rebundling of healthcare software, which happens all the time, and it happens in a cycle. So, you know, maybe 10 years ago, you just had a single point. It's, you know, now electronic records, and that was really all people used. And they'd use a few different things on the sides, and that was really it. And what happens then is there's either a technology shift, like AI comes along, or there's a shift in the fact that there's a need in the market that the EHRs or that central single point isn't solving, and the market answers. And in the case of the last 4 or 5 years, it's answered ferociously with lots of different solutions, whether it's AI knowledge bases, whether it's AI for radiology, AI for knowledge management, etc. So what happens then is you get this unbundling. So you get all the hospital systems saying, wait a minute, our EHR or our, you know, instance of XYZ isn't solving these problems, but these companies are going to solve that. Let's procure all of these software and make these companies solve this. What happens in over time is then you'll see Epic, you know, announcing their AI scribes and et cetera, et cetera. You then start to get rebundling, and then it goes back to a single point. Generally, it goes back to Microsoft and Epic, and then the new technology was coming in and there'll be unbundling again. So who wins there, other than Microsoft and Epic? Who wins, and how do you position yourself? So you. One aspect is, depending on the market, you need to work with regulation. That's the thing that electronic records largely in part don't do. So they don't become, you know, class 3 devices for making advanced decision support for patients in a large aspect of it. So if you're able to prove that your device has a significant impact on patient care and work with the regulators and get that regulated and get that embedded at the point of care, it's extremely valuable. The other aspect is the data. So what if you have unique data that only exists on your platform and doesn't exist anywhere else, then that's extremely valuable. And then you will always be there and you will be embedded. So the example, you know, in the knowledge space is external content. So, you know, the content that Open Evidence has, you know, JAMA and New England Journal of Medicine, that's all going to be commoditized. So in the next 4 or 5 years time, you're going to get that from ChatGPT. So, you know, Open Evidence has a, you know, now probably a $6 billion valuation. OpenAI is raising on a $500 billion valuation. They're going to go to JAMA and New England Journal of Medicine and get all this content. Doctors are going to be able to use that, and they're very clearly making the moves into that. So it's a race to the bottom for external content. That's commoditized. What isn't commoditized is, in my district general hospital, I got a STEMI. Do I send that to the tertiary hospital, or do I activate the cath lab here? What do I do? Absolutely. So it's that's how we think about building defensibility as well. But it's, you know, I don't think anyone has the answer. It's a space that's moving so fast. I think one thing has become clear over the last kind of 12 months. Things have settled down where we know what the game on the field is now. I think a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, after GPT-3 and 3.5 and then ChatGPT launched, the models were improving so rapidly where you couldn't think, what's this going to look like in 2 years' time?
Yeah.
Whereas now it looks like, okay, this is what generative technology is able to do. Yeah, it's going to get incrementally better over the next couple of years. Large language models aren't going to give us artificial general intelligence. So what has happened is it's settled down and it's created a playing field where you can see where you can now start to play. And the board is set, the pieces are moving type of Lord of the Rings quote. So it's that's good, and it's good for innovation because it allows players to actually build in the space. So I think there's going to be this kind of 3 to 4 or 5 years of a lot of players building, and that's only good for healthcare, and it's exciting to see more solutions come to the market.
Absolutely. And I have to ask now, are you thinking about AI scribes? Are you thinking about entering that field and adding that feature in?
Yeah, never say never, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The one question that came to mind is, on the surface, the beauty of AI makes it seem it's so easy and anyone can do it. What is the hard bit about building Eolas? Is it the evals? Is it kind of taking these outdated internal documents onto a platform? Is it the search functionality? What are the hard bits of building Eolas? The beauty of it is so simple and it works seamlessly, right? But
Yeah.
there's a lot more complexity behind it. Tell us a bit more about that, and kind of how are you building the right team when we're hearing, Meta paying hundreds of millions and kind of poaching from kind of the 3 or 4 AI labs that exist in the world. Tell us a bit more about the product, the difficulty, and kind of how you're going about it all.
Yeah, it's a good question. So what's the hard thing about building Eolas? So I think I suppose general zooming out, because that question is probably rooted in it's very easy to build now. You have Lovable, you have V0, and I've used them a lot, and I've compared it to just my own coding and that, etc., etc. It's very, very difficult. It's very easy to build something very quickly and Lovable that kind of works. It's almost impossible then to get that thing live in a safe and legal manner into a hospital. You have to rebuild the entire thing with cybersecurity and regulation and privacy all in frame of mind again. It's extremely good for testing a proof of concept and getting into the hands of someone and solving, does this solve the problem? But you have to go and do all that hard bit anyway with regards to building the product. So it's as easy as ever to build something initially, but it's still just as hard to then get that and then do all of the bit downstream. So I suppose the bits downstream can be summarized. So there's the question is here for vertical AI, essentially, or verticalized software, what wins? What becomes defensible? Data was what we just talked about. So unique data doesn't exist anywhere else, that becomes defensible. A moat with regards to distribution, that becomes defensible. So if everyone's using it and they don't want to use it, the big thing is brand and trust. And brand and trust only comes from actually engaging properly with regulation to prove this is safe, to prove it's effective, to prove that you're actually that it's not going to kill anybody or do something it says it's not going to do. So building that brand and trust is extremely hard, and it takes time and it takes effort. And yeah, you can put something Lovable and within 4 or 5 days you can have something working. It's still going to take you 2 years to build brand and trust and real world evidence. I think that's where the moat is. The other moat that you can have in verticalized AI is domain expertise, and that's one thing we hyper focus on in Eolas. There's 17 members, 5 of us are doctors, 4 of us are engineers. So this idea that we build a product with the lens of, would I use this? Would my colleagues use this? And you can trap yourself into a corner with that sometimes and not doing enough customer interviews, but for the most part I think that's a pretty good acid test. So more and more we're hiring more and more doctors that code, doctors that have experience with product, doctors that have experience with go to market. And I think that's where we set ourselves apart. I think historically healthcare software has been built by a giant that then has healthcare, has senior doctors as consultants. So they'll come in, they'll consult on the project for a week. Engineers will go away, they'll build it, and 6 weeks later they'll come back, and the doctor will go, oh, wait a minute, that's not kind of what I had in mind, or that's not what I said, And then there's this kind of iteration cycle. Whereas our iteration cycle is the space of a few hours, and you can get that really hone that. So domain expertise is another kind of moat for verticalized AI, is how we think about it anyway.
That's quite helpful. The next bit I wanted to kind of touch on is kind of more on kind of building a company like Eolas. We talked about kind of open evidence and kind of their market cap, which is just ever increasing. Tell us a bit more about the funding journey of Eolas. You've got a lot of institutional money. how did you get your first handful of investors? Was it angel? Did you bootstrap it? The advice you give to other budding founders and entrepreneurs when it comes to their own funding journey, what needed to be true for investors when you're building a product like Eolas, is attraction, engagement. I'd be quite keen to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, of course, no problem. So, the product we have now, we launched about 3 years ago in 2022, and it was 2021 when it was just myself and the company, and it raised a pre-seed round. Before raising the round, I had coded the platform up myself and then got it into about 28 hospitals and prove its use, etc., etc. And then went out then to raise that initial pre-seed round. So I think that's the first bit of advice that is even more true today. Is build something before you go out to market at all. Prove that it works. Find product market fit. As much as you possibly can. Now, if you're building a defib device, it's going to be hard. You're going to need a lot of capital. You can go out and get grants and things, but that's hard and that's different. From a software point of view, investors want to see more and more proof. Just back to this idea that anybody can now build something unlovable. People want to see those extra steps. They want to see the trust. They want to see the fact that it's proven out to some extent. So if someone's building from scratch from day one now, I would delay raising as long as possible and get to the point where you're able to actually prove this out. Some very practical advice that was given like in that window for me was reduce your own personal burn to as low as possible, because ultimately you're going to fail and you need to iterate and then not fail, and you need 10 shots on goal for one of them to actually work as you iterate. That takes time, and the longer time you can give yourself and the faster you can iterate within that period of time, the more likely that you're going to be successful. Everyone has different personal circumstances and what they can and can't do. Enabling yourself, setting yourself up for success as much as possible is the right thing to do. So yeah, I raised around then 2.5 million as a pre-seed round. In all honesty, that was because it was 2021 and everything was a bit silly, and people are going a bit mad with valuations and throw money out in zero interest rate environments. So, but yeah, so we raised that, started putting a team together, and then launched the product that we have today in 2022. I love coding. Definitely a lot of engineers that are a lot better at me than coding, so that's why we recoded the platform. And then we started scaling it. So we got it from 28 hospitals to 100, and then raised from Kindred Capital in London as our seed round. And we raised 3.5 million at that stage. So we've raised 6 million to date. We're now just starting to continue to rapidly scale, so we're going to have to raise again now. So yeah, that's the bit about the funding journey.
Amazing. Tell me a bit more about you need a certain type of team from 0 to 1, like 0 to 50 hospitals, 0 to 100, 100 plus, 200 plus. At what stage do you then go from like generalist to specialist? How has the culture and the team and the dynamic changed? And how has your role changed as a leader, right? So I think a lot of our listeners are kind of that stage, a handful of trust, 100 to 200.
Yeah, a great question, and like what got you here won't get you there type of thing. Going from 0 to 500 is not gonna. It's gonna be a different mindset, different process is gonna get you 500 to 5,000. And I think as a founder and as the CEO of the company, the kind of the way that I looked at it from the start was 3 years ago I wasn't the CEO that I am today, which is great because I have plenty of learning opportunities. The same principle is true for I'm not the CEO that I need to be in 3 years time. So you need to make sure that you're never the limiting factor for the growth of the company with regards to your knowledge and how you think about things, and the only way to get through that is talk to as many people as you possibly can with as much expertise as possible, to really hone down where your gaps are and make a call on that. With regards to like how the team shifts and changes, some people will start at the early stages and they'll evolve and they'll be that person at day one, and they'll be that person at 5 years and 10 years, and they'll grow with the company. Other people won't be, and that's also okay as well. Some people that get you from 0 to 1 aren't the people to get you from 1 to 10. And it's that so nuanced of each individual role really, to be able to identify that. I think the most important thing, there's so many different factors in that. I think the most important thing is upfront and honest communication with all of those players and those stakeholders of, these are the reasons, this is what we're going to try to do. And I suppose that's what we try to do in Eolas as well, is support that as much as possible, support that growth, but then recognize when, in the best interest of everyone, the next phase of growth is better to be done using a different approach. I think open and honest communication with everyone is a good way to solve a lot of problems that arise from that.
Declan, when it comes to team formation, right, what are the top 3 traits that you look for? And in a world of AI, where everyone is using AI to apply and everyone is using AI to screen, right? How are you filtering through noise to get to exceptional talent?
Yeah, great question. So, the with regards to the actual skills and qualities, so extremely high levels of intelligence, or not extremely high levels of intelligence, intelligence above a threshold. I think that you need to be intelligent enough. And depending on what vertical that the user's working in, the more intelligence, the better. Sometimes actually, in some areas, actually, nearly being too intelligent is actually a detriment. But there needs to be a threshold of that, and a that's what we've successfully done with the team. Like the team we have is like the intellectual horsepower in the team is phenomenal, and that's great. But that's just one thing. The next thing on top of that is emotional intelligence, which is nearly as important. And again, we're really lucky to be able to working with people who have extremely high levels of EQ. So many problems, like when you're growing and scaling the team or trying to solve a problem for customers or for investors or internal teams, aren't a difficult technical problem to solve. It's an emotional human to human problem to solve, and having a high level of EQ is so valuable. And then the last thing is initiative. Someone comes to you, there's a problem, you want someone to come to you, this is the problem, this is the solutions, and I've implemented these, what do you think? That's what you want. So I would say those three things. There's probably more, but there's definitely more, but I would say those three things are the things that we've consistently seen that makes them successful. In regards to the AI stuff, yeah, I'm just sick of the AI slop now, to be honest. Like I don't really use it that much anymore at all to write email, to do stuff. I'll do it, use market research and stuff. It just doesn't feel, people just don't think deeply enough. People were saying this on LinkedIn, like a year ago, people have stopped thinking, blah, blah, blah. And I was just kind of like, oh, that's the naysayers and da, da, da. It really actually is. I think we're coming into the trough of disillusionment now with it. And where anyone that has used AI to make an application to kind of join Eolas or whatever it is, it's you almost just mark it as spam because it just doesn't resonate or hit home at all. And so we don't use AI to filter applications. And if there's an application solely written in AI, in your head, you're like, I would rather just have heard from you. I want the spelling mistakes. I want the grammatical errors. I want all of the inaccuracies. I want you. So more and more, I think more and more people are feeling that. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that. In general, like, are you guys saying the same thing, and is that you have the same opinion, or are you just kind of YOLOing and leaning into completely?
I agree with you in the sense that you can tell when something's been written with AI. Like LinkedIn, when I'm on it and I'm scrolling, you can tell if something is in that person's voice or it's just been written by AI with a few emojis and a dash taken out. So that's that. Yeah, I think I'm of the same opinion as you. Just off of the back of that, we get often asked a lot. A lot of our listeners are looking to switch careers from clinical to health tech and non-clinical, in a sense. What are your top tips to break into? Because not everyone wants to be a founder, but they want to be part of a great mission like Eolas. What are your tips on standing out? Obviously, one of them we've just said: don't use AI, be authentic. What else have you got?
Yeah. Be your authentic self is definitely more important now than ever. So that's definitely one. I would say be relentless in your pursuit of what you want, if that's what you want. I think there's a lot of, and be very clear on the reasons why you want to get into digital health or to get into this space in general. I think there's more and more of a mass exodus. It goes back to the point I was saying about a push and a pull. Like the pull was because I loved the software aspect and I saw the value that had, and that was the really big driving factor. It wasn't a case of I don't want to work anymore as a doctor, therefore I'm going to go to digital health. I think checking that type of thought process is really, really important. If you're very, very clear on what you want, then be relentless in your pursuit of it, because you'll reach out to the thought leaders or the people in this space, and they're extremely busy and they won't get back to you. And you need to be thinking outside the box of how to get their attention, and there's not one single way to do that. You do have to kind of gather proof and evidence. The thing that we've consistently found that works really well is building something and getting it into the hands of people and then talking about it. So actually doing a thing as opposed to just talking about a thing. So we had an engineer that worked with us, for example, at the end of last year, who's a junior doctor, who had built something, and we'd seen it on LinkedIn and we used it, and we thought that's brilliant. Let's have a conversation with this person. So proving that de-risks it for us, if you know what I mean. It de-risks it for any digital health company, that they've proved they can do something, they can build something, and they can go through the grit of building it. Is really, really important. So there's lots of different things you can do, and then in general, I think go to the right places and network. I think the hackathons are very, very good. Talk to someone who knows someone who knows someone. Just embed yourself in the culture of the entire thing is important as well.
Amazing.
I love what you said, kind of that bit where you saw someone who built something, shared it online, and that gave you kind of the conviction to engage. And it goes back to the thing where we also encourage clinicians to kind of build in public, document their journey, talk about the things that they find interesting, in a way become a thought leader, or kind of an expert, and that increases your surface area for opportunities. So it's good you kind of mentioned that. Conscious of time, the last question I wanted to ask before you head off is, you talked about where you see Eolas in the next 5 years, kind of this amazing platform with a lot of proprietary data, the best internal knowledge for a lot of hospital sites across the world. What do you see in the next 12 months? Where is Eolas heading towards? Is expansion? Is it scale? Do you want to kind of go into other features and other spaces? Keen to hear what that does look like.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it is this idea of embedding that knowledge closer to the point of care. So we're now launching Ask Eolas, which is the ability to ask a question, get an answer directly, which is a fundamentally different experience than maybe a lot of users will have on the app currently. And we're rolling that out, and that uses computer vision to extract the information. So if you think about, you're wrestling with the intranet and you eventually find the Word document of the STEMI protocol, that is, a cardiologist that has sat down and drag and dropped boxes onto Microsoft Word. And if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. But don't do this if this happens. Traditional AI and large language models don't do very well at extracting that knowledge in context. So we use computer vision to extract that and keep it in context. Then we build a full RAG-based search pipeline on top of that. So phase one is roll this out to all the users. And that's what we see in the next 3 or 4 months. And then in the next 12 months is starting to embed that seamlessly with ambient listeners and electronic record providers, so that you can then get that knowledge embedded at the point of care that's context specific for that patient in that hospital. So that's the thing that we're super excited about.
Yeah, that does sound really exciting. No, I'm looking forward to it. I'm not an Eolas user, but I might just go borrow Amzi's phone to have a play with it. But Declan, thank you for so much taking this time out, kind of sharing your journey. It's inspiring. With the amount of value that's been created, we're kind of reconfiguring what it means to be a clinician, the way we deliver care, the way we access knowledge. I think it's exciting because it all does come down to, are we giving the best care? Are we accessing the right information in the right way, in a timely manner? Because to be honest, it does save lives. It genuinely does save lives. And I've been there in the middle of the night at a new hospital. You're trying to get to guidelines. You don't follow guidelines. The consultant kind of is like, super annoyed the next day on the post-take ward round because you didn't follow guidelines. So I think, what you're building is amazing. It's much needed. And we wish you all the best.
Absolutely.
Cheers, guys. Thanks very much. Really appreciate that. Really enjoyed the chat as well.
No worries. Awesome. Thank you.